We need an extra bit of celebration there. I am here, and it's happening. The connection is there. I thought I was having some kind of internet problem, then it ended up being a network problem. So a few reboots, casting out devils and taking authority over things, and a mixture of it all, and I am here. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you had a wonderful day. Hope you had a heaven of a day. If not, then you've come to a great place to experience gracious encouragement and insight for your healing and freedom journey. Mark de Jesus in the house today. So welcome, everybody. As you know or may not know, this live Q&A is for those that send in questions and they're interested in mental, emotional, and relationship health. So sit back, have a cup of coffee, have some tea, a glass of water, or I have my keto hot chocolate here, and ready to roll. And Sunday evening, I've got a little fire pit area that I'll be sitting out with my family this evening after the Q&A is done here. So looking forward to that. So hope you got some good things going on in your life and your journey. So these questions have been submitted. markdejesus.com/questions. You can go there, send them in. I do my best to try to look through and see what's a great question to address, what can be helpful for people that are walking this journey. Give me some areas that I can help everyone, not just one person, although I believe in the power of helping one person at a time. That's where the beauty is. The beauty is in impacting one person at a time. The modern world gets caught up in crowds and influence and being an influencer and all these things. It's great. It's fine. But there's beautiful power you can't find in the big, in the one-on-one moments. The one-on-one moments are those life-changing moments. And so I pray all of you in the comment section watching this live or those checking it out later are thoroughly blessed. I do have a backup recording this here in-house so that if something happens and I end up talking and I didn't even know the connection was down or something like that, then I will upload it so that it will be there for you. I've been so grateful for the encouragement. You are an incredibly encouraging tribe. I can't say that enough. Many of the comments, many of the emails that are sent, and that it does a lot for me, and I appreciate that. I feel connected to many of your journeys, although I've not met you in person. I've coached many of you. I've responded where I can, and I get some awesome emails back. And it takes a lot of the journey and struggle, and it puts a lot of it into perspective. So I'm very grateful, and I pray that it'll encourage you when you're going through the hellish stages of your life to keep in mind you're fighting for those who are going to be blessed by your story and by your journey, and keep that in mind, because I think on the toughest of days, my compass was influenced by everything I learn. I want to share it. I want to share it with my brothers and sisters. I want to talk into the battleground. I don't want to talk over people's heads. I don't want to just throw cliches at them. I don't want to just tell them, bless God, just pray and give it to God. On you go. I want to encourage people that can go deeper than that. So I had an email come in and I asked, could I share this? Because this was just very encouraging for me. I get a number of emails like this. I share with Melissa. I save some of them. I reflect on what's being said here because I don't take it lightly. And this was the email that came in just this week. Hi, or the week before. Hi, I just wanted to take the time. Hi, Mark. I wanted to just take the time to thank you so much for being a part of my healing journey. I'm hardly recognizable to a few months ago where religious OCD and OCD in general just kept invading every part of my life. I went from asking God to make me pass away peacefully in my sleep to actually enjoying life without constant shame, guilt, and anxiety. Hell was my own mind. And now I realize that 90% of the stuff I did and convinced myself was spiritual, was just compulsions. I projected my anxiety to how I saw God, and it was killing me. Sure, I would say God was for me, but I don't think I actually believed it. I felt like my every move was being calculated and wrote down to be used against me. But to realize that was my own doing and not God has been freeing. For the first time, I really see God as my Father. He loves me so much. I'm forever grateful that during my lowest moments, while I was sending you in questions on your YouTube live streams, you always responded with such love, and that really meant the world to me. I'm only 23 and excited to continue my healing journey. Can't wait for your new book. Praying for an abundance of joy in you and your family's life. Once again, thank you. This letter hit home to me in more ways than you can realize, because what you shared there, if I was to be a part of what God is doing in your life, it's an honor. It really is. And I don't know, I'm kind of a little bit more on the sensitive side today. I don't know, any of you like that today? You have those days? I feel like I could cry at almost anything right now, because I'm just so aware of where I've come from, what I've gone through, the healing I've experienced, the healing I'm continuing to experience now, and what I'm sharing with others. What a blessing and what an honor. And to have someone be able to connect for just some light bulbs to go off. And I'm sure this person who wrote this, you're not talking about arriving, but to be able to have a sense where you can stand a bit and go, okay, I think I know what I'm dealing with. Even if you're at that place where you're like, okay, I went from drowning to at least I'm grabbing a life preserver and I'm still in the ocean, but I at least can grab the life preserver. That's major progress. That's beautiful. So it's an honor to be your brother from another mother and introduce you to our Father and allow his healing work to happen in your life. So grace, peace, and the love of Jesus Christ that's shown through the cross and resurrection be to everybody. And God is involved in our mental health. He's involved in our emotional health. It's not a separate issue. It's not a side issue. It's everything. And this message isn't for those who need very, intense mental health care. It's not just for them. It's for all of us, because all of us need our hearts healed, and all of us can use some transformation. And I think that's been a problem that so many have dismissed their need for deeper healing, their need for deeper work in their hearts. And God is doing a work to bring us back to that. And my mental health struggle brought me to that place where I realized I need heart healing. I need a journey of heart healing. So this is awesome. Let me get into the questions if I could, and just love being able to navigate this. I think this is going to head in some good directions. It looks like it's about time management and how to organize your day, but I think we're going to get a little deeper into some important aspects. So my question is, how do you organize your day personally to ensure there is time for self and family apart from work and duties? What does your schedule look like? What's a good way to ensure a healthy daily schedule? I enjoy your podcast and have read your book, I Will Not Fear, which helped me immensely. Working a full-time recovery jail ministry. Now, this is an important part of the person asking the question. It can be taxing, constantly pouring out. My number one prayer is that my wife and 2 children and the Lord will not get the leftovers. Also, that I would not treat ministry as a 9-to-5 job. I've learned how important my mental health is and how often I neglect self-care, over duties, performance, and what is, quote, noble and right. Sorry for the long intro. Now, it wasn't long. My question is, how do you organize your day personally to ensure that there is time for self and family apart from work? Looks like it got. Oh, he repeats, What does a schedule look like? What's a good way to ensure a healthy schedule? It seems there's always a dish to wash, a room to clean, a task to fulfill that can steal attention from quality time apart from doing. I often feel caught up as a Martha and wonder how I can be Mary and still get everything done. I first of all, this is a great question. It goes into a lot of tangents. So I'd like to take some time to share a little bit of my journey. I'll start with some pinpointed areas that are needed. First of all, your desire to have time for yourself, time with your family is incredibly important. And I think there is a group of people that are moving past saying family is important, and they're actually wanting to live it. I found in church community way back in when I was staff on pastoral staff on a church up in Connecticut, that there was a lot of like, make sure you put priority to your family, make sure. And I saw aspects of that, but I felt like it was more said, kind of written out, but to actually live that out is a whole different thing. It's a whole different matter, because men have this battle. It goes all the way back to Adam. Remember when Adam has this whole thing in the garden and God sends him out of the garden, and what's the message God sends to him? He says, you're going to have to work, and you're going to have to work hard, and it's going to be like your back's going to be sore. It's going to be back-breaking kind of work. And in the Garden of Eden, it's not that Adam wasn't working. It wasn't that laborious, draining, painful energy kind of thing. It was more joyful, relational, creativity, connection, just flowing in that. So with the work of sin, there's a specific battle that hits men. I'm not saying it doesn't hit women. It does. But it's a very common battle that hits men, which is we find our identity in work. So even when men talk to each other, hi, how you doing? My name's Mark. How you doing? My name's Frank. That's awesome, Frank. What do you do? Right? We can kind of move quick into that unless there's more bandwidth of other areas to talk about. Then we get into what we do, our jobs and stuff like that. And it takes a while to get, maybe just some of the simpler areas or the heart areas, right? So men can get lost in that. So their job is not enjoyable. It takes a real toll on them, right? Their job is successful. They get lost in that. Their job takes over, calls on them. And it's an identity issue. And so working with addicts especially, it will really pull on identity, because the demands for addict recovery, jail ministry, that kind of stuff is constant. It's constant. If you're a pastor, if you're have any kind of work in church or ministry work, there is never an end to the calls. Now I'll bring that down even further. People in what I would call the compassion work arena. This would be counselors. This would be even hospital workers. This would be nurses, doctors that are dealing with emotionally intense kind of things. I would even put police officers there. Certain, there's that work where it can just keep pulling and take a toll on you, right? I think that pastoral ministry is, and that's in any kind, like what you're describing here. You have a jail recovery ministry. I believe there's aspects of what I would say are ministry PTSD kind of situations, because you've been involved in being exposed to the pain and trauma of other people's pain and trauma so much, and the demand of what they bring. I need your help. I need you to help me. I need you to help me. I need you to help me. The majority of contact to people that are counselors, or it's crisis. It's I need help now. No, I've got this thing. I say, tell me. It's not uncommon for me to get emails, Mark. I need desperate help, and it's all this emotion being documented, and then it ends with, can you help me? It's this cry. So with addicts, they in recovery or jail ministry, there's a lot of pull, because we're not just talking about, hey, you have this one area. There's a whole life thing going on. There's a whole recovery process that's needed. And so it'll pull on that place to find identity. And so I found, as I allowed God to do the renovation work, there's layers of stuff I felt that I began to be aware of. My layers don't have to be the order of your layers. The first one that was blaring to me was I lived a performance-driven lifestyle. And I had to come to terms with that. And I came to terms with that while I was working at a, go kind of church, lots of church services. At one point, they had like 2 Saturday services, 3 Sunday morning services, a lot of Sunday night stuff, Wednesday night, Thursday rehearsal, not to mention other stuff in between, meetings, one-on-ones, and it pulled on my performance-driven Christian life. So everything was like, I got to get the next event, get this thing, I got to prepare that sermon, prepare this teaching. Now, I could do it, but it was like I was neglecting my identity. And one of the dangers of modern day ministry is we are not tending to identity. We are lost in what we're doing. We don't know who we are. It's a very, very, very bad problem. Now, I'm speaking to ministry, but people that are, in other areas at your job, this applies for you too, okay? But this arena hits very close to home, and you're asking me about my schedule. So I realized performance was an issue. So I began to throttle down that performance pressure. I actually began renouncing it in my life. And a lot of that birthed what I talk about in the rejection mindset. I put that book up on the screen because I began to start separating out who I am as a son, being loved as a son. And that's challenging because I didn't have a lot of references of people just loving me as I am. They love what I did. They love what I provided. So even when I left that church, whenever I bumped into somebody from that church, hey, how you doing? Mark, we miss the worship you brought, right? And they mean well. They mean well. But it helped me to realize our connection was based on what I did, so it fed that broken thing in me. I didn't know how to just relate as I am, as a loved son. So this now pulls us into a vortex. With the performance comes codependent kind of behaviors, where there's this need to be loved, this need to be validated. So people call, I got to call them back. This thing came to me, I got to figure it out. This email came in. It actually took me years and years of detox and really diligent OCD kind of work, because I was compulsive, making sure I did the right thing. I got to answer people the right thing. And it took a toll on me, took a toll on my health, took a toll on relationships, took a toll on me even knowing what God was doing. And so as I began to work on, I'm a people pleaser. I want to make sure people are happy with me. All that stuff goes back to childhood. All that stuff goes back to how we were made to feel loved. So I could give you, here's how I order my day, here's how I do all these things. It's not really going to fly unless I start dealing with those areas. So then as I started to come into an understanding of the Father's love for me, understanding why people do the things that they do, the battles people face, I started to get more into the root system or the heart behind a battle. And once that veil kind of lifted and I saw things in that way, compassion, grace, so much of what you see and hear from me is birthed out of those days of seeing myself and why I'm doing these things and getting to the heart of why we have our battles and why we don't do what we want to do and why, right? And so as I'm navigating that, then I launched into ministry. My wife and I get married. We launched into Turning Hearts, and it took us years and years and years of plowing on trying to understand who we are and what we do. And I would do a lot of one-on-one work. And I remember doing some reading on having sessions with people and doing that. Because I would sit down and I would teach somebody for hours. It was exhausting. was absolutely exhausting. Like I would somebody come to my house and they'd have this issue. Maybe it was an addiction or maybe it was an anxiety issue. Right? And I would sit down, have a little whiteboard next to me, and I would draw and write and describe and teach and do this over and over. It was a recipe for burnout. Then I realized, okay, I got to develop materials that I go, here you go, see this, then come see me. We'll work off of that. And I exposed myself to some coaching training. And those of you that help people, I encourage you to get training. And the funny thing was, a lot of what I heard over and over again at the front had nothing to do with like structure or what you should do or how to, it was a lot about codependency. It's like you got to learn to not be codependent. You got to learn how to pour your heart out without taking on the burdens of other people for them. And we're all broken. We don't know how to do that. We don't know how to go, I'm with you, I'm praying with you. But to not let that then erode us and pile up and pile up and pile up and pile up. Now, I don't have a perfect formula. There's some days it gets to me. So what I decided was if I see a drift where I'm not having the energy for my wife and my kids the way that I want, I'm making decisions to shift and change. So where we are now is a product of that. I found that I couldn't work at that church anymore. I couldn't be in that kind of system. It just wasn't going to help me grow. I was going to get lost in it. My wife and I wouldn't have time. We get lost in it. Then we started a ministry, and it was like I had this idea we're going to travel and stuff like that. And to be honest, it just didn't really go that way. The traveling didn't happen. The book writing started to happen. So I was like, okay, I leaned into that. Then I realized I'm glad I didn't do all that traveling because I'd constantly be away from my wife and my kids who were, babies at the time. And I remember even when Max, before even Abby was born yet, like in that, like realizing like, I think we're wired differently. Then my wife and I pastored a small church, and we were trying to build organic church. We were trying to build a sense of like, everyone come, we contribute, song, exhortation. I really saw that like organic, like in the Corinthian writing, Paul writes, and the house to house. I wanted to cultivate that. But then, long story short, we moved on from that, from what we felt God calling us to do. But I also felt too, in that structure, there was a dysfunctional pull on us to just kind of be that cookie cutter, to just like, whenever they call, I need you. Hey, I called you today. We're here. It's like, I'm not 911. There is I had to actually tell people in my church, if there's a 911 emergency, I'm going to give you the number to write. It was kind of sarcastic, but I don't know. Sometimes I make a joke. I say, if you got a 911 emergency, there's a number to call. Okay. Are you ready? Write this down. And I said, it's 911. So that took a lot for me to begin to have those boundaries. And so then I started to realize and move more and more to, I am not everyone's savior. I am not a good fit for everyone. Do you know that that's freeing for me to go, I'm not for everyone? It frees me up. It frees me up. Someone watched my video and doesn't like it, or I'm not for them, or I'm not for them right now, or maybe I triggered something and now it's not the time, whatever. One-on-ones, when I meet with people, I don't go, I tune now to, am I really a help for this person? So there's a lot of like religious guilt that we have to work through. Perfectionists, OCDers, pleasers, performers. I think I just included everybody in that one. That's the whole church. We have to do business with guilt because we confuse guilt as God's leading. I've talked to many Christians that they just say yes to everything. And I'm like, this is a disaster. Jesus said no to a lot of things. And he didn't go where they asked him. He didn't do what they asked him to do. He said things that sounded insulting. And because he never gave in to toxic guilt. And it's everywhere. They were even, remember when he was late to Lazarus's funeral? Which that's a profound story. He's late and they're like, if you were here, if you were here, that guilt, that family guilt, I'm half Puerto Rican. They got that like Puerto Rican guilt they'll throw on you, If you were here, that passive aggressive, if you were here, he would have been, this wouldn't have happened. My Norwegian side says it really quietly. Well, if you were here, and then you just get the silent treatment for 3 weeks. Right? What does your culture do with the guilt trips? Right? Throw you on a guilt trip. And what does it do? Their words produce I feel bad. Jesus didn't have that hook because he was sinless, but he was loved by his Father and was connected to that. He had the approval of Daddy. This is my beloved Son, whom I'm well pleased. This is my boy. I'm proud of him. You and I didn't have that within us resonating as we jumped out into the world and help people, right? So it's very challenging when we're helping people, but we are trying to heal and grow ourselves, right? Trying to minister things, or trying to work on your own stuff. So today, moving more and more to what I do now, because I had this goal in the horizon. I want to teach and I want to create a library of material that will speak into the battles people struggle with. Because I have this grid of insight that I want to share with brothers and sisters to help them walk in healing and freedom. And as a pastor, I got aspects of that. I did seminars. I would do Sunday night stuff. I'd do, but all week long I was getting pulled into stuff. For me, that institutional model wasn't a fit. So I had to fight my way. Then I had a local office for 3 years up in Connecticut. And I met with people there and did one-on-ones. And then I had a whole group that I was working with remote. Now today I work everywhere remote. People, all other states, other countries around. But I had to keep walking through the struggle of guilt and people pleasing and realizing I'm not going to make everyone happy. And if you're working with addicts, you have to have incredible boundaries. Even mental health, you have to have incredible boundaries because the broken hooks in us will feel bad and we'll get pulled. And then there's the busyness part you talk about. Both I've had to work on in my life. And so my slowing down series is a part of my own personal journey and growth because I've had to learn to slow down the RPMs and make space for that margin. Now I enjoy the space. I love sitting down with a good book in the quiet. After I'm done here, I'm going to sit by my little fire pit outside and just in the quiet, be there with my wife and kids, and just enjoy that time. If they all leave and they go inside, a lot of times I'll just sit there in the quiet. The quiet for me is incredibly refreshing. I do have introverted leanings, so I do have where time alone restores me. I think sometimes it has to do. If you don't know, if I have hearing issues, I wear hearing aids, and so sometimes your muscles have to work harder to hear. So sometimes I get tired and I just go, okay, I just got to rest my ears for a minute. Now, 15 years ago, that wasn't the case. The quiet was disturbing. So we get uneasy, and that's where the Martha thing comes in. Now, Martha is somebody that you need a Martha, and there's Marthas in all of us. What Martha was doing was not wrong. It was misplaced. It took over, right? So you got to do dishes. You mentioned you got kids. Like when you got kids, it's like it's just like a constant whirlwind of stuff, especially when they're really little, baby, toddler. It's just, you're exhausted. So a lot of grace is needed, right? I think if I had a person who was like working for me or something, who had small children, I would really encourage that we got to find a way to show a lot of grace during that season, because you need that energy. You need as much sleep as you can possibly get because sleep is rare. So the Marthas there's a good thing, but in that moment it took over. So you're cleaning the dishes, right? Here's my feedback for you and for all those listening. If you're still with me relating to this, are y'all relating to this? It's not wrong. Like, the dishes need to get done. The floor needs to get cleaned. There's two things I want to say to that. Are we doing this because we're following disturbance, right? Because I don't want to sit still and this thing's bugging me. I got to just, right? And this is the bigger one. The second thing I want to say, does it take over? So if you're doing the dishes and your kid comes over and goes, Daddy, 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 and you're like, yeah, slow down, do the dishes, and listen. Yeah, Johnny, tell me about that, right? So when Abby was young, too, I found this, there's areas where Abby and my daughter, bonded, because it's all about the bond. When your kids are young, you got to bond, because that's the foundation that you get to speak into their life, build from there, developing the bond. And what dads do when their kids are young, they go into hyper work mode. They're like, I got to provide the bills. I got to make the money. It's a deception. It's a deception that gets us men lost, because we put so much into that. We got to put a roof over our heads, which is good, but we make that so important, it takes over. So then when we're home, we're exhausted because the stresses of the day, we put so much. And then you come home, and what happened traditionally? What did a lot of your dads do? Came home, get the paper out, right? You can barely see, he's ready to pass out, right? Mom's making food. If your parents were together, mom's making food. Yeah. Go play, right? Yeah, we'll do that. Maybe we'll do that tomorrow. He just wasn't there because he's exhausted, because he's got stresses he put all into his work. He's lost in his identity. So when he arrives home, he doesn't have something to pull from. So I found too that kids, when they talk to you, they want to talk at, like, quote, inconvenient times, meaning you're in the middle of something and they want to talk. I've learned to let that be a cue of divine interruptions. So I practice, like, okay, I got this thing going on. God, this must be a great moment. So, and we developed that bond, and we'd have great conversations, even just super little. And sometimes it would be while I was cleaning, or while I was just fixing something up, or we just chat, or I'm tired and I'm ready to go to bed. And my daughter does this. And then she decides she wants to chat. And I'm like, all right, God, give me grace. The grace would happen, and we'd have an amazing connection. So that's led us to, we've made our schedule where my schedule is mine. No one wakes me up. No one tells me this is what you got to do today. So we work hard to fight our values, and I have to say no a lot. I say no more than I say yes, probably, as far as my work. I used to say 99% yes, 1% no, and then I'd apologize a million times. I said no, now it's it. Because I want my yeses to be heaven yes. Heaven yes. Rather than like yes, So as far as my time, and I don't know if this interests you, and I don't know if this is even related. Now I teach and I write. So I have a lot of creative avenues in that. I have creative flows. So I need a lot of space alone and creatively, which I thrive in. I could sit, some of you, this would drive you nuts. I could sit for 3 hours just writing, and maybe just having a glass of coffee or something. That's about, and go, look at the time. Well, gee golly, look at the time. So the way that I work is I work in blocks. A lot of you writers need to learn this. So like even how I schedule my days, I have certain days I do one-on-ones, or certain periods of time I do one-on-ones. And this time, this sweet spot is where I have my best energy, is where I'm going to do my writing work, my creative work, my video work, right? I have those like really peak hours where it works best. And I've learned it through practice. I used to like have one-on-ones all throughout the week. While I love doing one-on-ones, they take a certain amount of energy out of me that doesn't make room for the writing. So I would find myself back when I was in Connecticut, I'd be sitting there, let me get a little like writing work in. I had a session coming up in a few minutes. Let me just get a little writing in. And the door would knock and this anger would rise up in me. I'm trying to get So I was like, well, I don't want to be irritated when somebody's meeting with me. We're doing hard work here. So I realized, okay, this is where you get to learn how you work, and this is where you get to learn how your rhythm is. And so I would have certain days of blocks. Okay, we're going to do sessions. We're going to do right there. Because I'm going to sit, and I'm not going to think about anything but the person that's right in front of me on this screen that I'm talking to. And then there's days where it's like, there's no meeting. I'm going to spend time writing. Now that's my wiring. See, a lot of the journey of what you're asking too is a journey of getting to know yourself. I tried to be like other people. Like, oh, I'm a pastor. Well, that guy doesn't want me to be like that. Well, no. And I had to learn I'm not wired that way. And I appreciate my wiring. So when you talk about room for yourself, one of the reasons people struggle to make room for themselves is, one, they don't value themselves at all. They have a very distorted picture of themselves. And two, they haven't found what brings them joy. So one of the questions you ask yourself is, what do I do that seems to invigorate me? That when I'm a part of this, it adds energy. And then what aspects drain me in what I do? I think that's a very powerful metric to look at in your life, because most people spend their days doing what drains them, and they never consider moving more into what makes them come alive. The reason I am where I am today is part of my journey was accepting, I'm not, that's not my thing. Some people in a pastoral role, they're like, oh, I just love it. I had a bunch of phone calls today and this thing, and I went and visited this person and went to that and did this. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm exhausted. But if I sit down with you for an hour and we have a heart to connected conversation, God shows up. It's powerful. And I spend 3 hours over here working on this writing, this next book, this next thing. And then I go sit out by the fire pit for an hour and just stare at the clouds and just let God refresh me. So I have like when I wake up, I have things that are primers in the morning. Because for me, I like to start my day with things that set the compass of my thinking, right? And it's a variety of things, and it shifts and changes. But I find these things, sometimes it was waking up and starting a journal, and I'd have a pre-made journal. I taught it to, when I was a pastor, I taught it to some of the people on my team, and where you have like certain questions to get you started. What happened yesterday? What do I feel God's saying to me? What are some things that are highlighted? And focus is my attention, right? So if I wake up and I'm like, I'm tired, it gave me a focus. Other days I was like, other seasons I should say, it was like starting the day, I would do something physical. Get up and I'd go for a walk immediately. Don't think about it. Get some shoes on, and get out the door, go for a walk, and let your feet do the walking and the Holy Spirit do the talking, or whatever. Just kind of get the primer going. To this day, I do a lot of reading and documenting things, and most of it is not developing teaching. I don't wake up and like work on a teaching. I wake up and let God work on me. And the more that I get guilt out of my life, the more I get shame out of my life, the more I see stuff. Oh, thank you. Oh, it's so good. Write it down, document it, stare at it, look at it, right? And I've learned to, not really have the phone nearby. I'm not really doing emails. That's a discipline. Now, if you work in recovery, you work in jails, that thing's ringing all the time. It's never going to stop. My phone there's a morning and a night where it just goes into do not disturb mode. And it's like every alert just gets quenched, because I like to start and end my day letting my heart get replenished, right? And I'm still learning. I'm still learning that. There's seasons of my life where my sleep was terrible, like just terrible. And I had to learn what's going on. What do I need to learn, understand? I'm like waking up, this and that, all that. I had to learn how to navigate that. So the advantage that I feel I have in my journey is I look at the learning available at each season of my life. It's not about what I'm doing wrong. It's just about what's the new adventure here. What's the new discovery? And that's the maturity process, is learning. So when you organize your schedule, all of you could get something from this. Okay. Everybody can get something from this. When you organize your schedule, what do we typically do? We typically organize our schedule by time, right? Okay, from this time to this time, I got this. This time to this time, I got this. Okay, I've got 30 minutes there. Okay, I'm going to do whatever. Some people have these like they're so wound up like schedules. I remember I had a guy I worked with on staff. He had like the whole day filled from this time to this time, this time. I was like, that stresses me out. Like, where do you go to the bathroom? Where's the coffee break here, bro? But that's an extreme in my opinion. Then there's the kind of like, well, I schedule this. That's great. What we schedule, what we value needs to be scheduled. But I don't schedule by time. I schedule by energy. I look at something and I go, how much energy is this going to take? Okay. Does it line up with my values? And how much do I have the energy for this? Because I've committed here to invest in these areas to have the energy for this. So that could be anything from somebody asking me to help them with something. Somebody, hey, could you do an interview with me? Could you help me with this? I look at, is this lining up my values? Do I have the energy for that and where I am right now? And I invite God to be a part of this. I don't go, God, should I do this? And wait for, yes, no, right? Sometimes we think that's how it works. It's just, no, I'm growing and getting the guilt out, because that's not of God. I'm getting the anxiety out. That's not of God. People pleasing. Because if we really want to live like Jesus, look at all the times Jesus walked away. And they were like, where'd he go? Where's Jesus? I don't know. We got like 1,000 people here that want healing. Where'd he go? Or they're like, oh, wait, hold on. I got someone who could. Where? Have you seen him? Right? And then he'd show up, and somebody's like, Jesus, how do I want to follow you, but I just gotta go to my father's funeral. And every human on the planet would go, oh, you lost your dad. I'm sorry, I understand. Jesus goes, let the dead bury the dead, bro. Follow me. It's like, what? Oh, you remember back in the 90s, we did this WWJD, what would Jesus do? It's a book and all that kind of stuff. It's like, what would Jesus do? There'd be a lot of calls he wouldn't answer, a lot of letters he wouldn't reply to, a lot of people that he wouldn't do what they asked him to do. It's very, very interesting. So I look at energy, and when I plan in blocks. This is my writing block here. Now my world is different now, because now I order my schedule. And I look at my family and what works, timing. I try to be available evenings with my kids. So I have like a kind of a cutoff of when I can meet with people. Like, okay, I'll make room here, but that's it, because I want to have that time with my kids where we sit down, I'm winding down with them. And then I have pockets in certain times throughout the week where I'll go do a coffee break and I'll take them with me, and, they'll have a Slurpee or whatever. And we'll just, we'll chat and catch up. Me and my son right now are doing morning walks together. So we go for a walk, and I try to get Max, and I try to find that, get in his world and chat back and forth. So all that to say, it's a long answer to a question that I could go on and on for, but I value my family so much that, like, if my wife and I are talking and there's something urgent that's come up, I've made it my aim to go, no, this is important. Let me pause. There's something going on with my kids. Pause. This is important. And to cultivate a life, like, obviously I have meetings or session work. I'm showing, I'm not like, just like, hey, I can't make it, but that takes work, because relationships are not controlled in a easy box. Even my own relationship with myself, there's some days where I'm going through seasons where I'm just tired. I've been the past 2 years, I've dealt with a bunch of health issues. I created a lot of fatigue. Went through COVID, a month or so ago, and had a big fallout of that, of energy. So I had to have grace in those moments and allow myself to realize, stick with what's important. Stick with what's important. I have this saying that I say to people, which is this, is that follow the grace. And what I mean by that is follow what is evident that God is doing versus being hung up on what you think God isn't doing. We spend a lot of time being hung up on what we think God isn't doing. So I remember when my wife and I got married and we started turning hearts, and I started speaking places, and then I was like, as I was going to churches and getting involved, I was frustrated because I wanted to grow more. And so there was a little bit of me pushing, and people are like, well, you should get on the phone. You should call these people, make all these contacts. And I'm like, yeah, but we don't have any relationship. Like the stuff I'm talking about is not just me coming in, speaking, and just kind of doing, the show and, hey, all right, praise the Lord. See you later. It's like, there's investment here and stuff like that. So it wasn't breaking open the way that I thought. So Melissa and I, we looked at this from a standpoint of, let's pay attention to where the grace is. And I had this space in my schedule. And I was like, I think it's time to start writing the book. And that's where the first edition of I Will Not Fear birthed. Actually, speaking of birth, Max was being born during that time. She was pregnant with him. And that's when I began starting to write my first book. And probably one of the predominant things that people appreciate and write to me, thank you for this book. Thank you for this material. Well, if I didn't lean into the grace, it wouldn't have happened. And I didn't even consider myself a writer, by the way. Just got to let everybody know. I did not consider myself a writer at all. I Will Not Fear started off as a pamphlet. I wanted to write a pamphlet because I kept saying the same thing over and over again, everywhere I went. I said, let me put this pamphlet together and I'll just hand it out. So I wrote the outline, put it all together. Then I was at this meeting where a guy was doing prophetic ministry over people. And I'm like, yeah, check this out, see what's going on. Long service. It just went for hours and hours. I'm not saying it was bad, it was great. And at the end, he'd prayed over everybody in the building. And I was like, well, I guess it's not going to happen to me. I'll just, and one of those kind of things. Prays over my wife and I. And one of the interesting things he said, one of the reasons for the season that you're in is it's time to write the book. It's up on the screen, and you've got some outlines and things like that. I literally at home had it up on my computer monitor screen. I'm like, I was like, wow, all right. But at the same time, financially frustrated. Where's this going? What's happening? Stress everywhere. I got a son on the way. I'm trying to figure out who I am while I've got something here that's important, but I'm still working out a lot of stuff. I leaned into the grace. A lot of families need to learn to lean into the grace because there's certain things that aren't happening. And we get frustrated. And it's like, yeah, if that was happening, what's important would get neglected very easily. This is why marriages fall apart. This is why parenting falls apart. This is why we scratch our heads and go, yeah, because we didn't lean into the grace. We leaned into the striving of trying to make all this stuff happen. Some of you are like, I'm trying to get my ministry going. Okay, well, is it happening? You're putting this effort in. Is it happening? Well, not really, but I got 2 small kids. Pay attention to those 2 small kids. Because we're always trying to like build empires. And this is the classic story is people chasing empires out of their own brokenness. And then what's important gets neglected. I'm speaking to some people here tonight. If I'm not speaking to y'all, I'm speaking to myself. And I think this is super important because especially like when you're involved in something that takes energy, it takes involvement and takes, you got to get clear on what you're going to say yes to and what you're going to say no to. I've done a lot of work, by the way, with, interestingly enough, nurses, people who are nurses. I've gotten very, very well acquainted with their world and what it's like and the drama they have to deal with. And a lot of the principles I'm talking about here and strategic of how to care for yourself because you're seeing death, sickness, negativity. You got your staff and the drama, right? There's so much drama, right? And all that going on, right? Think about your job and where you work. I've also worked with a lot of people in real estate. God has just opened the door, real estate agents or mortgage lending kind of people in a variety of ways and areas, right? And their work, it never stops. It never turns off. It's not 9 to 5. It's not 9 to 9. It's 9 a.m. till 9 a.m. the next day. It's 24, right? So you have to get clear. Like, well, where's the market? Where's the people? Well, we're in a rush right now. This is going on, right? And it's like, yeah, you get that. Build a big business, all this thing. And then your marriage falls apart, right? I'm not saying, if you invest, that means your marriage is going to fall apart. But you hear what I'm saying? What we invest in, we put a lot of stock into the thing that keeps us busy and has this shiny glimmer that keeps pulling on our brokenness. There's areas where I thank my Father in heaven, he didn't open it up the way that I asked him. I asked him to send me out in a dramatic way because of my just the passion I took, and I left the church I was working at. And I'm glad it didn't happen the way that I wanted it to. I pastored that small church. As tough as it was to end it and move on, I'm glad I needed that to propel me to the next. Sometimes we're so afraid of failure. We're so afraid of feeling like a failure. And sometimes we need this propulsion to move us on to the next thing. Like we got to get out. We got to move on. And many people, you're a spiritually abusive church and you're like waiting on God to speak to you, to give you a release and confirmation to let you go. Or, you're in a place where you feel stuck, and sometimes we need to take a step, right? And take a step. And for many of us, the step is into the healthier domain. I love the church. I love the body of Christ, but how I'm wired doesn't fit in the current institutional model. There's some days I have a schedule for my videos, and there's some days where it's just not clicking, right? And I got this thing, and Max maybe needs some attention. There's something going on, and I'm learning now to kind of go, today's not a day for a video. Today's not a day for a video. I put this work in. Well, I'm gonna let that marinate a little bit, right? The old training's like, well, we got it. It's Wednesday night service. We gotta make it. And it's like, when I was a pastor, I would preach these messages, and sometimes it'd be these long messages. And what drove me crazy was there'd just be a big Selah, big like, okay, there's a lot of weight to this. What's the problem? Next Sunday. And I was like, I would stand up there and I would feel so conflicted because I was like, we need to still think about what I said last week. We need to I don't know. I almost thought of just I'm just going to put the CD in, just hit play. We're just going to play this again. Maybe I should have, because it was like the way we treat life. It's like next thing. Netflix, binge. I'm going to watch the whole season right now. Where's the season? I want to watch the next season. Watch season 10. What do I watch now? Oh, there's this other show. And we go to church kind of the same way, and we read a book, So it's getting back to what's valuable and what's important. And I've minimized my life. I say no, and I have space for interruptions. I have space when things come up. I've got room more now than I have before. I've paid a price for it. I paid a financial price, a lot of seasons of challenge, difficulty, a lot of seasons where it wasn't happening. But I keep going back to the grace. So I'm taking a long time to address this question because there's a lot in it. Look at your day and start asking yourself, am I living out of what I really value as far as what I'm giving myself to in the day? Many of you have mental health battles, and you need more margin to make space for your learning. And it's not there, right? And you need space sometimes for nothing to get more acquainted with yourself and let God allow you to get more comfortable. I mentioned my morning season where I have these things I do when I wake up. One of the keys is that I find an enjoyable way to do it so that when I wake up the next day, I look forward to it. Something like I got a few things I'm learning right now, and I'm excited about it. And I have a way that I have like a computer, like, database kind of thing. There's plenty out there. You can use Evernote, OneNote. I use one called Notion right now. And it's just a great way for me to, I clip like stuff I read it. And so I'm currently in some learning where I'm just kind of taking stuff God's showing me. I really believe that. If you're not a techie person, don't worry about it. Have a journal. I have tons of journals actually in the cabinet right there. Years of journals, handwritten ones, right? So a lot of it's just documenting what I'm learning. And I go back to it, I reflect on it, and I let it speak to me. And so if you work in some kind of compassionate work role, addicts, emotional stuff, where you see a lot of emotional stuff all day, you need more downtime than the typical person that you may bump into. I don't know what average is, but whatever average is, you need more recovery. If you work a nursing or a third shift, you need very, very special care to, making sure your nutrition is as best as you can make it as an act of love for you, because your sleep cycles get jacked up. And it's tough. Some of the schedules they put, a doctor gets started, they when they first get their practice going, and what do? They put him in like these crazy night shifts, sleep deprive him. That's what you want to do. Sleep deprive a doctor. So he's half out of it while he's trying to figure out what you need. It's like, but my point being, if it's okay. So now, your job may have its requirements. Now you may want to say, okay, I get a feel of your boss. Does your boss value family? And hey, what can we work out? And you can find common ground where you can find good meeting places, right? And then if you find, okay, this is what they're asking, they're not really budging from this. I got to do this. When you're not there, what's it going to look like for you to get refilled? And what's it going to look like to pay attention to what's happening in your household? I want to be alert. I want to be aware, and let my time, the Bible talks about redeeming the time for the days. I want to take, redemption's a powerful thing. It's a very, very powerful precept in the kingdom. And many of you grieve over lost time, lost relationships, we're all grieving some of those things. God is redemptive. And part of that redeeming the time is not only watching over a guardian, but God restoring how we utilize our time and letting his work, his grace work in our life so that my rhythm is different, that I'm not just crash landing every day. I let God work in my time and work in that in powerful ways. So that's what I pray for you. You mentioned a struggle of quality time apart from doing. That's an identity journey of learning who you are apart from what you do. So you have to make time away from that. You have to make time by yourself. And here's something that's been a challenge for me in my journey. is relate to people, have interactions with people that don't relate to you in that role. Because my whole life, that role gets put on me. And I'm in a setting where I'm like, I'm not here to, and then it just happens. And they're like, yeah, but I read your book and this, like, I just wanted to throw darts, So if you can find that though, that's important because you want to connect on that identity level as a son, not as a worker guy in ministry. And your heart is in a good place where you don't want to be in the leftovers to your family, and you don't want to do that over duty of always chasing this what's right. That's the perfectionist mentality. The perfectionist mentality that I talk about over and over and over again, and will continue to, is that just right, just right. I got to make sure this is just right, and it's never enough, just right, and it's never enough, just right. So I keep chasing. So the perfectionist influence has to be pushed back, because once that happens and I push the hamster wheel away from me, now I've got to actually acknowledge the brokenness and pain that I have that needs healing and that needs tending to. Y'all know what I'm saying? Y'all know what I'm saying over here? If you have any super chats, feel free to use them. I'll make sure I pay attention to those. I pray y'all are encouraging. Thank you, those that you took some time to pray for my network connection. I rarely have a problem like that right at go time. So I appreciate your patience in that and waiting on that. It looks like the connection has maintained so far. So I pray that was a blessing. Man, that was a lot longer of a question than I thought in my life. Let me do some OCD stuff. I think I can knock out a few that not take as long with some of these. We'll see. Let me see here. This one I think is about Leviticus. You ready for Leviticus, folks? Leviticus. I haven't let it play out. Apologies if some of you are like having had bad recollections. I've been watching you for a couple of years now, and your content has really helped a lot. I also have a couple of your books. I have OCD that was triggered when I became a Christian. Anyhow, I have a question for you. You said it was triggered when you became a Christian. I would be curious what kind of faith culture were you brought into? That'd just be interesting. I, like many others who watch you, struggle with a punishment view of God, and I'm trying to work through that. However, I find it difficult when I'm reading the Bible and come across scriptures like Leviticus 26:15 through 19, where God is telling them he will punish them. Okay, I'm just going to say this right off the jump. When you have a punishment-based relationship with God, I would not advise going, okay, I'm going to start in Leviticus. There's some tough road in there, but that's the classic thing that perfectionistic OCD strugglers have, is they go where the disturbance is. As I've walked in my recovery journey myself, you tend to go where the disturbance is because you have a tendency to fix the disturbance. So if you have a theological like verse or scripture that you're hung up on, that's where you're going to go. And that's what causes and inflames a lot of, I'm sorry, I pull up the script. I can't help myself. I'm curious. Leviticus 26, 15 through 39. Okay, if you don't perform, I'll do this to you. I will even appoint terror of you, wasting of disease and fever, which shall consume the eyes. Wait, I need the background. Which shall consume the eyes and cause sorrow of the heart. And you shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. I will set my face against you, and you shall be defeated by your enemies. Those who hate you will reign over you, and shall flee when no one pursues you. People are going to be like, are you making a joke of the word of God? No, what I'm bringing out is Number one, OCDers follow disturbance. That's what they look for. They're checking for disturbance. So it makes sense with OCD, you go to Leviticus. That's not where we would tell anyone to start. Why? Why do we tell someone, don't go to Leviticus? Leviticus, if you're in heart healing, Leviticus is not the place to go. Why? Because everything in the Bible needs context. You're jumping into the middle of a discipline moment and you don't have context. So with my kids, for example, I've used this illustration a lot. When we have disciplinary things that are going on, we have a sit down and we talk, right? I spend a lot of time hanging out with my kids, talking with my kids. And when discipline comes, we bring that right into conversation, right? And we have a discussion and we talk. Sometimes it's me one-on-one with one of them. Sometimes all four of us having a conversation about something, right? And there comes a few moments within it where I make some firm statements about something. Now, imagine if you open the door and peeked in just as I said the firm statements. You might go, ooh, wow, this is intense. You might even feel anxious. Now, are my kids feeling anxious? No. Because why? Because we had context. We're having a conversation. So it leads to sobriety. So this is what's important. We have to know context. We have to know what's going on. And we have to know what's happening within this dispensation of time. This is God needed to show us how impossible it was to fulfill the law. This blessing and cursing kind of world came out of sin being revealed because law revealed sin. With the law, sin was revealed. I don't know why I just did that. Like, did kind of like the nerdy. With the law, sin came about. Paul said with the law, it brought about understanding of sin. Thou shalt not. Oh, now I'm aware. And it was overwhelming. It was impossible. It was a tutor designed to show us. So what Jesus did, holiness requires this. Absolute holiness without atonement brings what you're reading here. So I can read this and go, wow, thank you, Jesus, for who you are. Thank you. See the grace response? Somebody with a religious OCD can go, oh, this is me. They're reading out of context and they're spiraling and they're going into right? You can very easily you can do that in New Testament passages. You can do that very easily. OCDers can even twist things and distort things so bad, you can actually read something that's actually intended for absolute good and blessing and reverse it. You know, that's why I talk about this. When I talk about the rejection mindset, the twisted nature of what it does to communication. Someone could say, you look handsome today, and you hear, I didn't look handsome yesterday. Come on, I know you've done that, right? You ladies, someone that tells you, oh, you look beautiful today. And all you heard was today and turned it to yesterday. They didn't think I looked beautiful, right? We go negative. It's filter how we're interpreting. So when you're reading the Bible and if there isn't a sense of grace and a sense of love and a sense of who God is and his goodness, stuff gets out of context. God needs to show us this long picture, long story, but we can't jump into a chapter without the whole story. If we took a novel and jumped into it right in the middle, you'd be like, what's going on? You know? I'll do that. My wife will be watching something. I'll sit down and I start asking questions. I ask questions. Sometimes I don't catch something. I'll watch it and I'll get lost in something that I'm seeing. Like, wait, what did you just say? What is this? You know? It's like, just watch. I'm trying to get context. I lost context. Wait, why'd they just do that? You know? So context is important. And so when you have OCD, you have to realize you get disturbed very easily. So you take a scripture when it's creating that guilt spinning disturbance, you put it on the shelf and you go, okay, I don't understand this right now. And God, reveal it to me in due time in your journey for me. It's very, very healthy because it makes you less compulsive. In compulsion, you're on Leviticus 26, what does it mean.com. And then it's just, they might make you feel better for a second, or they make you feel worse. You realize this is the nature of obsession. It distorts. It's interpretation that gets lost. I talk about that in the distortions that feed OCD. Right there, number 3, distorted meaning of thoughts. And that includes the distorted meaning of the Bible. You read and you go, oh, and you're stuck in Ananias and Sapphira. Wait. Is God going to kill me? What's going to happen? We can do this. We take something and we use it in a literal black and white for us right now in a punishment sense. Most of the Bible can very easily get context lost. And then we lose the meaning, heart meaning of what God's saying, which is actually meant to build your faith, build hope in your life, build up your journey. So anyways, I'm going to do one more. Yeah, one more tonight. I took a long journey on that first one. Hope you're blessed and not as stressed in what I shared today. All right. This one is about a nurture, I think, or abandonment. Since around the age of 12, my parents have traveled frequently in and out of the country for business-related ventures. There would be times my parents would take turns traveling. One would stay, the other would go, they would go together. These trips would last in intervals of 6 months to 1.5 years at a time. Wow, that's a while. As a result, my mother in particular missed out on a lot of milestones in my adolescence: puberty, growing up, jobs, graduation, prom, special birthdays. That's a lot of your adolescence. I am almost 32 now and started to wonder whether this has an effect on me. Yes, it does. It does. There's a lot of people that grew with maybe an extreme version of what they call it, latchkey kids, where you let yourself in, you make yourself dinner, TV dinner, your babysitter's TV until your parent comes home later that night for whatever reason, or they're lost in their work. You said business-related ventures, so there is a sacrifice in that, and one of the sacrifices is they're not going to be able to give you the things that you need. So, for whatever it's worth. So how's their business? Is it amazing? I hope it is, because they spend a lot of time away. That'd be tough if all the businesses they went into fell apart and they neglected you for very, very important moments. I'm not really upset about it, but again, I wonder if it's contributed to some issues I have in myself and our dynamic. Yeah, I would say it'd be a part of it. I think it might be helpful to first look at what you struggle with. Where does that stem to? Because it does seem like this would produce neglect in your life. Absence of, there's parents who are there physically and not there emotionally. There's parents who are not there physically, not there emotionally, right? And that neglect creates a lot of absence. So then here's what's important for you. You have woundedness that you don't know is there sometimes because you don't know you needed something. Does that make sense? You grow up and your father doesn't tell you he loves you, for example. You never had that. So you don't go around going, hey, you know what? Growing up, my father didn't tell me he loved me and that's affecting my life. You don't even know it because you don't even know that was a thing until you bump into somebody or sit in a counselor's office. You go, what was your dad like? And then they go, did he tell you he loved you? And you go, that's what people do. When I ask them, I go, tell me about your relationship with your dad. Did he tell you that he loved you? And they go like this. As immediately I know he didn't, because they're searching in the back. Their eyes are moving to this side and then this side. They're searching the back caverns in the farthest part of the basement of their brain for some kind of memory, right? So most of the time, though, we don't realize, that was needed. That's the danger of neglect. And that, I feel, neglect is a form of trauma and even what's called PTSD. When we think of PTSD, military people that abuse, hit, yelled at, abused, we don't think of neglect as producing similar outcomes. Things you were supposed to be given wasn't given. Now you're struggling with things like that people even with PTSD have, and you don't know what to point to. You're right. And I'm not telling you, you got to go blame your parents. Healing is never about blaming. It's about recognition. It's about recognition. And so I'm here to say, yeah, that was significant in your journey. And there was some neglect. When I have spoken to my parents about this, they say they did it for our family, and they are not the only parents who have done this. That's their defense. That's their shame. That's their shame. Until they're ready, it's pretty pointless to talk to them about it because they're going to have shame. And with shame, we defend and we blame, right? Hey, we did the best, and this was other people did this too, right? And look at the Franklins. Their kids seem okay, or whatever. And it just dodges. Get very dodgy with the conversation. And when you hit me this way, I block it this way, hit it this way. Look, we're getting very dodgy. My daughter's saying something, and I can't admit it because then it means I'm a failure. Right? Because that's what shame is covering. I don't want to feel like a failure. So that's why parents will be defensive. Love your parents, love your mom and dad. But the defensive posture, well, we did the best, right? And a lot of times it's like, you know what helps? That affected you, huh? I'm sorry. Let's talk about it. Healing conversation, right? But because we don't deal with our brokenness, those conversations are difficult. So this is the thing too. When you recognize there's some potential brokenness regarding your parents, our response is go to them and talk about it. It's normal. We all do it. Want to have a conversation? Want to talk it out? Don't go to them until it's time. And it may not be time. You may never get the time because most of the time they're not ready. And I've learned we got to let the Holy Spirit open that up if that's happened and their heart's available to talk about it. And sometimes you can test the waters. See how they talk about other people's brokenness. See how they talk about dealing with their own stuff. Maybe test the waters and just kind of see. And then you see, you know what? I can't go there with them with this right now. I may be able to talk to my therapist, my pastor, or friend. I go in other avenues. Can't do it here. So that's my feedback, for what you're sharing here. They acknowledge that it could have affected my brother and I, then quickly justify their choices. That's their shame response. And shame clouds a lot of our brokenness. So if they admit to it in their minds, this is the unconscious way of thinking. If they admit to it, then shame tells them that means you're a failure as a parent. And life isn't that black and white. No one's perfect in their parenting. So it prevents them from having humble conversations because humility is part of breaking through shame. Isn't it, folks? Humility. Because shame gets leveraged when we feel we got to be perfect and do everything just right. When we humble ourselves, we see for what it is. Okay, I'm broken. We're all broken. And I got stuff to work on. I'm continuing. And that would be so powerful. Those of us as parents, we can do that. I even mentioned I felt like I raised myself sometimes. So that's telling out of the neglect, you felt I got to take care of me. So this pressure came in. So I'm going to guess, you write to me and tell me if I'm wrong. I'm going to guess that you've kind of had to feel like if it's to be, it's up to me. And you're kind of a bit in your own world. You have pressure you take on pressure very easily. And you tend to not always feel that people can be relied on. So you got to rely on yourself. Hey, write to me and tell me if that's off. Because I'd be more than happy to adjust. But I get a sense that that pressure went on you. And so you say you feel like you raised yourself. They quickly dismiss. That's just showing that they're just not in a place to be able to handle it. There may be a sense where they are emotionally immature. Emotionally immature, not in the sense of like they can't present themselves. Emotionally immature in the sense they don't know how to handle this kind of language. So so they're like, well, at least somebody was always around, as well as my older sister and relatives. In addition, we would communicate over phone and email. So I think they could just admit that they were fulfilling their dreams. Yeah, it's true. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Then couching in, "We did it for you" speech, right? Right. That's good. You're right. You're right. To just go, "Hey, we were lost in our dream, our business ventures. We were traveling the world, discovering what we could do to rise our business to higher ventures." I don't know why I go into that voice and these kind of things. "We sincerely apologize." "Dearest Henrietta, with sincere condolences and deep humility, I apologize. I lay myself in humility." Anyways, let me get back to you. "But we did it for you. All our ventures were for you." It was your dreams. At the end of the day, this is just one example of the many issues I'm coming to realize in regard to the relationship between my parents and I. Am I making a mountain out of a molehill, or is there something here? Well, I shared you with my feedback. You're not going to be able to have a lot of conversations with them. Find counsel, find places where you can process this, and look at the area of neglect. Where were my emotions neglected? And you can follow that trail by looking at, what do you struggle with? Is it mood? Is it mood issues? Are you perfectionistic? You have a lot of anxiety that comes about because pressure was on you. You had to raise yourself. So you tend to be on edge about things in your journey, or all the above. Then that can show you, how did I learn that? And was I equipped, and where was I not equipped in that? So anyways, much love to everybody here. I'm going to head on out. Speaking of time, I had a good time tonight. I pray that you guys did too. Thank you for being patient with me, being on here late. If this has been a blessing, go to markdesus.com. Would you help support these videos? That mean a whole lot. Share them with your friends. Send it to them and tell them you need this. This is for you because you have this problem. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Go to the donate button, and you can do a one-time donation, or you can also become a regular monthly supporter. Of course, you can go to my topics page. On the topics page, you can look up a certain subject and go, I'm going to dive deeper into that area. And there's a list of resources you can go to and check out. So it's been a pleasure being your brother from another mother. I look forward to next time, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. This is your brother from another mother saying to y'all, until next time, I'm out.